That's unbelievable statistic that those two guys could still be. Couldn't hear exactly what he said.
Welcome to another edition of Flashback to the Track, the podcast that gives you PTSD about racing. I'm James. Mark, what's going on, man? How's it going, dude?
I am doing well. I am doing quite well. It's good to be back. It's been a little while. It's nice to be here with you talking about a race that James then informed me that the next year's finale was probably better. But you know what, man? This race is baller. So this is the one we're going to talk about. It was my turn to pick, and this is the one that I picked. So
it's okay. The only ball busting comment I'll make is like I feel like we're like in a mountain range. And we're like, all right, how are we going to land on top of this mountain? And then like we picked a valley, and then we got on this one. I mean, we're on the mountain. We're not the peak, but still we're on the mountain. And ironically, it has to do with the peak in the title too, I think.
Yes. Of course. So this week we're gonna get right to it. This week we're discussing the 2006 Peak Antifreeze Indy 300 presented by Mr. Clean. This is the IndyCar finale race for 2006. I should say Indy Racing League, the IRL. This is their finale for 2006, and it's an absolute barn burner, and championship scenarios are insane and lots of people close in points. So this is a crazy race. I remember watching this race. It was kind of like one of the first IndyCar races I really watched like intently. I think 05, 06 when I really started watching IndyCar. And I remember watching this and just being absolutely blown away by how close the points finish was, and that they could, after all that racing, have such a tight championship between, four different drivers right at the end of the season. Because, in NASCAR, it was rare to find that. Obviously, 2004, we got a scenario where there's lots of guys still eligible in the last race, but usually there's one or two guys pretty eligible at the end. But IndyCar this season was insane. And actually, fun fact, IndyCar, since Dan Weldon won the championship in 2005, no one has clinched the championship going into the final race of IndyCar. He was the last guy to do it. So it's always been decided at the last race, which is really cool run of about 16 years. So.
Yeah, NASCAR has had that notion of points manipulation, but IndyCar for at least the last 2 decades, from what I've seen, you go to the last race of the season and there is a championship fight between two drivers at least. And it's always close. There always can be something that happens in that final race that shifts the championship into someone else's favor. And to do that without points manipulation and a totally different point system that doesn't reward as many bonus points at times for certain drivers, it really does make the whole year championship battle worth watching week in and week out. And less races too. An IndyCar schedule is like 20 races, Mark, about that? Or
this less? Time, I think it was 14.
14. So 14 events. And then to have 4 drivers basically come down to the end of it with a chance, and not only a chance, but basically down to the last lap mathematically with a chance, says something about just the competition level of IndyCar. But unfortunately too, Mark, man, something about the competition level that must be said is that there is domination by 3 specific teams in this era. Chip Ganassi Racing with Target Chip Ganassi Racing, Marlboro Team Penske, and of course, Andretti Green Autosport. They are the dominant teams in IndyCar. Now there are other teams, but I feel like that lust that we talked about before we jumped on the podcast that we have for early 2000s IndyCar, when there were a lot of more independent teams. Of course, the racing was just strictly on ovals. The competition level was really fierce, but around this time in the mid 2000s, IndyCar is starting to open up with road courses. The oval schedule is shrinking a little bit, and the dominance between the biggest teams is really starting to show.
Yeah, so at this point, 14 events, 11 ovals, 3 road courses. They went to St. Pete, Watkins Glen, and Sonoma. All the rest were oval tracks. And yeah, like this season was pretty crazy because if we look at just a quick overview of the season, it was essentially owned by 4 drivers. 6 drivers won races, but these 4 guys were the only guys that won multiple races. So the Penske Racing teammates, Helio Castroneves, Sam Hornish Jr., they both won 4 races each. And the Chip Ganassi Racing teammates, Scott Dixon and Dan Weldon, Scott won 2 races, and Dan Weldon won 1 race coming into this final race of the season. So, and the only 2 others that won races were Tony Kanaan and rookie sensation Marco Andretti, who almost won the Indy 500, getting passed by Sam Hornish for, I believe, what is still the closest finish in Indy 500 history.
That's right. If you weren't a Marco Andretti fan that day, I mean, you probably were a Sam Hornish fan that day. To see 2 Americans duel it out coming down the front straightaway to win the Indy 500, that was something to behold. But yeah, he is a sensation at this point. 3rd generation driver, son of Michael. So promising young career in front of Marco. And, you know, to your point, you see that, you know, only Tony Kanaan's the only other guy to win a race, but he's still in that fold with Andretti, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, they're teammates at Andretti Green Racing. So only 3 teams won races.
Yeah, it's insane that like the dominance of those 3 teams is just a stranglehold on the whole series. I mean, you still got good names in here. We have Panther Racing. They're still here with, I think, Vitor Mira is their driver. You have Ed Carpenter, hashtag Eddie Carpenter. He's in here. He's not quite the proficient oval ace that he will become in the later years, but he's a contender, none the doubt. And of course, the wily veterans like Scott Sharp. I mean, it shows that like the car really does make a difference here at this stage. And another interesting note too about the 2006 season, this is the last year that Team Penske was actually based up in Indiana. They actually moved down south after the season to Charlotte. So all of their operations from, I think at the time they had the IndyCar operation. I don't think they had the ALMS team.
That'll start in 07.
Yeah, eventually, yeah. So that'll start the next year. So that team is also coming into Charlotte area as well, along with his NASCAR program, an empire that had at that time 3 cars running full time in the Cup Series, plus random Xfinity cars. And a lot of people who were working with Roger up in Indiana were actually not going to come down Charlotte. So could this be a tide of turns for Penske? Their domination not going to continue since they lose the personnel? Or do those personnel go to other teams and then strengthen more of the competition within the sport? A lot of interesting notes from this season. It was a really fun season, I'd say. This, to me, like the mid 2000s of IndyCar, there's something cool about it. Maybe because I was a kid and I liked it, but I don't know. And also the faces, so many great drivers at this point in the series.
Yeah, to me, the IRL was really becoming the dominant open wheel series at that time. I think Champ Car, as it was kind of falling out of favor. They were going to really weird racetracks and a lot of street courses, and
the viewership too.
The viewership was really bad. They were on Versus for a while.
Spike
like,
TV,
you couldn't even find it on television.
It's funny you mentioned wrestling at one point when we were talking earlier, and it's like Champ Car was on the same channel as wrestling.
Yeah. Exactly. and like on Versus, so they were on the same channel that had like Wednesday night hockey. It's like it just wasn't great, and they had really fallen out of favor. Like they didn't have a lot of cars anymore, and it was just ended up being a lot of guys that ended up in IMSA and didn't really go anywhere. So it was
AJ
tough.
Allmendinger ended up in NASCAR,
and Sebastian Bourdais was just smoking everyone at that time. So he just was just winning a million races. And this 2006 season in IRL was crazy because coming to the final race of the season, Helio Castroneves has a 1-point lead over Sam Hornish Jr., his teammate, and then Dan Weldon is 19 points back, and then Scott Dixon is just 2 points behind him. So 21 points separating the top 4 coming into the final race. They are the only 4 eligible for the championship. So let's talk about the scenarios. How does it work? Well, you get 50 points if you win, 40 for second place, 35 for third place, plus you get the all-important 3 bonus points if you lead the most laps. So essentially, it's up for grabs between the top 4 at Chicagoland. But so you get 3 if you lead the most laps. You lead 1 lap, you get a point, and you get 2 for the most laps. So if you lead the most, you get 3.
I thought you get nothing for leading a lap.
I think you still get 1
matter.
point.
I thought it didn't matter, and it was like whoever leads the most laps gets the points. I'm like,
you are correct.
That's
sir.
savage.
You are correct. You do not get a point for leading a lap. My bad. It's just 3 for leading the most laps.
Do you get a point for qualifying though? Right on the pole.
At this time, I don't think so.
Okay.
You do, because who got the pole? Hornish. I don't think he got a point for that at the time, but I'm going to look that up because 2006 IndyCar season. because I believe now you do, but back then I don't think you did.
Yeah, because the thing about IndyCar is like, without points manipulation and so few points being handed out, it really places the precedent on finishing well consistently and also running up front consistently. Because to not win the race, but to get those 3 points for leading the most laps, it's still pretty crucial when it comes down to a whole season, especially with, you look at the way the points break down per position on track.
I'm trying to figure this out. I do not believe you didn't get a point for winning a pole at this point.
Darn. Poor sudden Sam. He was so sudden, but didn't get rewarded for it.
And then someone's going to look that up and find and be like, no, you're an idiot. You're wrong. But you know what? Comment on the YouTube video and let us know. All comments help. So if you're wondering how the top 4 drivers in points might do today, so they all had an average finish of 4 or less at oval tracks in 2006. So, which would be suck because now there's only 4 ovals on the IndyCar schedule.
Yeah, it's really interesting how the I am Indy stage of IndyCar was, very heavy on oval racing. And, honestly, IndyCar had a very positive impact on oval racing. Obviously, the biggest one being the safer barriers and its implication throughout oval track racing and its implications throughout racing. At this track, specifically Chicagoland, dude, throughout the 2000s, there were some monster hits and really bad incidents at Chicagoland. And it's really great to see that they push the safer barriers. And also, even throughout the race, you can see on the inside, the AMR safety teams or the Delphi safety teams that IndyCar had in place at that time. They were had makeshift walls that were stationed out just a little further because there weren't specific openings so that they could have safety people get to drivers sooner. I thought that was really crucial too. That was just an interesting note I saw just from watching the race a little bit.
And still to this day, the IndyCar AMR safety team is a world-class safety team. It's they're at the cars before they do stop moving. They're incredible. They do an amazing job. So
we saw it a little bit in one episode when we talked about Sebring and how they were one of the few people back then in IMSA to have a doctor on board in the car. I feel like IndyCar took that to a whole nother level, having multiple doctors on board. And they're the first people on site aren't track safety people, they're doctors. I think that's critical, especially
if you ask anyone that saved James Hinchcliffe's life in 2015 and stuff like that. Just so IndyCar is a world-class when it comes to safety for sure.
Yeah. When you have moments to react, they definitely have done a great job with it. So hats off to IndyCar and the IRL at this time period. So this broadcast, Mark,
it's absolutely horrid.
It's horrid, but let's talk about that. So it's technically an ESPN ABC broadcast because at the time ESPN and ABC had the rights to IndyCar. Another thing that helped sell it more than obviously CART or Champ Car at the time because it had better network, time slots and coverage. But this is a broadcast that isn't technically the ABC broadcast or ESPN broadcast. It's from Star Sports Television, which is the broadcast just with their own announcers. And in the booth, we have Gary Lee and Larry Rice. Household names. I don't know if you know them, Mark, but come on. Gary Lee coverage. That's a must-see race right there. On pit road, you won't hear him for most of the race. Actually, I'm pretty sure we can't hear him at all during the race. Dr. Jerry Punch, Jamie Little, and Jack Arute. But we'll hear them during the pre-race show at least, so we get to hear them at some point. But it's weird how we don't hear them at all during the race.
Yes, very strange. This is just a weird licensed feed to Star Sports, and all the comments on the YouTube are wow, this was terrible. I don't know who either of these dudes are. Might be my bad. I don't know. I've never heard of these people before. But you know what? It's not unwatchable, but you don't get any pit road reports. It's kind of like when you watch the Olympics, right? And it's a world feed and they just put different announcers on it. So you're watching American announcers in the US, but they don't have any choice over what images they see. It's just being sent to them. So they have to call what's being shown because it's kind of the way F1 is broadcast now. It's just one feed. All the countries have their own commentators and that's just how it works. So it's definitely strange. So let's go into our race overview. So we are racing today at the gloomy and dreary Chicagoland Speedway in Joliet, Illinois. Rain has actually pushed back the start of the race and washed a lot of rubber off the track. It was raining and cold. So no rubber on the track should make for an interesting race. There's also concern over rain rolling in and shortening the race, but we only need to get to halfway to make it official. So if you get to lap 100, if it starts raining, they can call it and the race is official. Naturally, top 4 in points have the top 4 starting spots. So Sam Hornish on pole, Scott Dixon's on the front row, and then Castroneves and Weldon are in row 2. And row 8 also holds significance with Danica Patrick and Sarah Fisher alongside one another, the only 2 women drivers in the field. So,
and if you think this rain is going to dampen the spirits of this sold out crowd, you've got another thing coming. That's an interesting note. This was a sellout race for the IndyCar finale. And you think about it in 2006 for the Cup Series race at Chicagoland. I can remember Dave Burns, actually, no, Bob Dillner doing a speed report at the end of the telecast and being like, really disappointed by the turnout here. Not really good with fans. I don't know, Mark. I feel like that hometown base for Danica Patrick has a lot of people turning up, but also Illinois is a very big IndyCar state.
It's right next to Indiana. Chicago's not far from Indianapolis. So
they do love their open wheel racing up there. Now let's speak about some other drivers in the field. We're going to talk about a strange starter, but this race doesn't really have too many strange starters in it, but we have some notable people in here. One of the oddest fill-in drivers of this race is AJ Foyt IV. He's going to drive the number 27 for Andretti Green Racing in place of the injured Dario Franchitti, the Scottishman. He is out. Foyt is in. He has been a full-timer in IndyCar for years, but he's been mostly in the NASCAR world. So it's interesting for him to get back in IndyCar. He's going to be in a very competitive ride here, Mark, that number 27 with Andretti Green. And also in 2005 and early 2006, before, he really started to get into NASCAR, it wasn't really panning out. I think he drove the 38 for Aikens for a minute in the Xfinity Series. If I'm not mistaken.
For a few races. He was on MBS 24/7, the rookies, remember?
I do. It wasn't the most highlightable moment, but yeah, he had like a couple of really random one-off starts, mainly out west. Like he wasn't really making starts back east. Like it's at Phoenix and Vegas, and California.
He finished the last 4 races of 05, and then in 06 he started running the full schedule, but then he started DNQing. So they removed him from the car, and that's when Leffler got the ride. And then he attempted 1 race with Fitz Bradshaw and did not qualify. And then he never appeared in NASCAR ever again. So
well, today he's not in racing, Mark. He's gone out of it and he's working for the Indianapolis Colts scouting department, working hard to make sure that your precious Lions don't get any talent, Mark. I'm very sorry.
Life after racing, folks. It's very important. Have a plan for life after racing. So
he you know what's nice? He has a job that makes you realize there's more to life than racing.
It's true. And the funny thing about this is when the announcers are like, oh, maybe this is an opportunity for him to get a ride with Andretti next year. I'm like, no. That's
I'm pretty sure Andretti is like, pretty full.
Who do we have? Who's around that's driven an Indy car before?
Yeah, who can get in and just make laps and not crash?
That Foyt kid. All right, put him in the car.
All right, his dad's here. His granddad's here. We'll just put him in. Anyways, the biggest pressure, though, is going to be on Dan Weldon and Scott Dixon today. They're going to stay up front throughout the race. Being teammates, they're going to want to work together, Mark. And that's really interesting to see in this race. You see team cars really working together to keep track position. Not really necessarily to try to drive away from each other, but it's more like a blocking technique.
Yeah, it's interesting. Basically, it's going to be the Penske and Ganassi show. So let's get into it, James. We're going racing to crown the 2006 IRL champion. And this races off to an action-packed start. So we've got Ganassi teammates Scott Dixon and Dan Weldon. They get a huge jump on the start, take the top 2 spots, and they are battling. They nearly make contact several times the open laps. But James, maybe the Penske guys are just laying back and letting Ganassi fight for the win, because if they sit in 3rd and 4th all day, they should be fine to, one of them to get the championship.
They should be, but unfortunately, we get our first setback for one of those championship contenders. just 20 laps into the race, Mark. Helio Castroneves, man, he's going to come to pit road. He's going to be too fast entering the pit lane as everyone's pitted under an early yellow flag. And I got to talk about this yellow flag, Mark. That was a really interesting yellow flag. I mean, there was just a little bit of contact and smoke, but that official threw that flag quickly. And there was a little bit of damage. I think there was a mirror on the track, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, a little bit of debris. So they call it early yellow and everyone pits.
Anyways, after the yellow, we're going to get settled into a very long green flag run. And we're going to start to see that pack style of racing we talked about. We see the field spread out though, Mark. You see the top contenders, Weldon, Dixon, Hornish, nose to tail up front with Castroneves working his way through the field, trying to jump back up there. But you know what? Who's up there? My boy, Tony Kanaan, Mr. Slurpee 711. He's making a great run, trying to play spoiler today. But you know, Mark, there's got to be team orders to say, Tony, I know you might have a fast car, but we really got to look out for this championship fight.
Hey, he's not your teammate, so you don't have to get out of his way. Maybe if fellow Brazilians are going to move out of the way for each other. But yeah, man, Castroneves flies through the field all the way up to 6th. And then we get an excellent save by the announcers when Helio uses some colorful language like, oh, I couldn't understand what he said there. It's pretty clear what he said if you listen to it. And
we'll repeat it for you, too, if you didn't hear it.
Yeah, that's unbelievable statistic that those two guys could still be. Didn't hear exactly what he said.
On lap 69, we get our first green flag pit stops of the day when Dan Weldon comes to pit road. He's the first of the 4 championship contenders to do so. And James, I always love how in IndyCar, the right front tire changer, he always wears a different color fire suit or has like a different color helmet or something. So the driver can help locate them in the pits. I think that's really clever. And they still do that today. So.
I think what's really clever is how Marlboro Team Penske has one group of their pit crew in red suits and the other group in black suits. That's a very smart tactic. So you don't end up going into the wrong pit stall, because that would be a very, very disastrous moment, especially during green flag pit stops.
Yeah, Penske's always got something going in the pits. For their IMSA program, they were the only teams with 2 cars that pitted them separately rather than have their pits together. So I guess that's a Penske thing, you know.
The Penske perfect motto. Now the four leaders are going to cycle through their pit stops under green, and everything's uneventful. Great stops by the Target Chip Ganassi team and, of course, Marlboro Team Penske. But Helio Castroneves is still 12 seconds back behind the top 3. He really needs a caution to help bunch everything back up, but this green flag racing is just hurting him. He's really feeling the effects of restarting so far in the back on that lap 20 caution.
And the lead pack of Weldon, Hornish, and Dixon, they're absolutely flying. And by lap 85, they're already in heavy lap traffic. And that could play a huge outcome in this race. With the way these cars race around the track, like with a wide open throttle, even like if you slightly have to lift coming up on a lap car, you get a huge loss of momentum and somebody shoots by you. But that's not stopping Dan Weldon as he goes 3 wide on the outside of lap traffic to make it by. And you got to remember, these lap cars are still in their own race, trying to get around one another for position as the leaders come through. So you want to be respectful of the leaders, but you also have to have, your own fight. There's a bunch of different fights going on the racetrack. And we get some incredible onboard shots during this from Dixon and Danica Patrick as they find their way through this traffic. So I can watch IndyCar onboards for hours on end. It's just so entertaining.
Something to also notice during the in-car onboards is you notice these drivers shifting. There is a bit of a taller gear that these drivers have to run. So they have to shift, actually. So there's a shorter, 5th gear, I believe, and then a taller 6th. So they're getting down to that 5th gear in the corners, trying to get a little more RPMs up, trying to get more momentum as they come down these straightaways. Because to your point, Mark, you lose any momentum in the corner, you're going to pay for it on the straightaways.
And just past halfway, Dan Weldon, he has essentially locked up the bonus points for leading the most laps. So give him the 3 points. No one else can lead more laps than him. And that's the 6th time this season that he has led the most laps. But he's won just 1 race so far. So that's got to be frustrating. And we've also got just 6 cars on the lead lap because the top 3 are running that blistering pace. And just as we're saying that, they run through another group of cars and they're leaving just 4 cars on the lead lap, the top 3 and Helio Castroneves about 12 seconds behind them.
And it's really close with the top 4. It looks like it's going to come down to the final pit stop to help determine who is going to be out front of that 4-car pack. Now, Wheldon and Castroneves both head to the pits on lap 115 and both have flawless stops, picking those cars up with fuel and getting 4 tires in just an insane amount of time. I could watch IndyCar pit stops all day long, Mark. Just clockwork. Now, man, I've always wanted to be that guy or gal who has to have the responsibility of spraying the water on top of the fuel nozzle after the pit stop. Because 1, that looks cool, but 2, that's super important because that helps whenever that fuel nozzle disengages to make sure there isn't a spark or any kind of fire, because that could like lead to the driver, man, with these open cockpits. But that must have been always a cool job. You must feel like a carnival game, you know, where you spray and you hit the target and you blow up the balloon. It's like that, except more life and death.
It's a dream of mine to do that one day. That or just be like the dead man. Just to say I did something on the pit stop.
That's easy. You could just find a really crappy race team that just needs a dead man. And
yeah,
like,
or
okay.
One day I will hold the lollipop for a pit stop. It's gonna happen. But
I've done that before. It's fun. It's weird when they hit it because then you're like, oh shoot, and you got to pull it back because you're going. Anyways,
Hornish is going to make his stop, and then Dixon comes down, but notably does not look like he took a whole load of fuel. So they still have to make one more stop. So maybe they're running him light to turn some faster lap times, because like fuel with these cars, like it plays a huge role of how much fuel you're carrying, how fast you can go. So remarkably, after the stops, the top 3 are all still running nose to tail in the same order, but we get a second caution of the day at lap 149. There's debris on the track, which is a huge break for Helio Castroneves, as he was just about to go a lap down to Dan Weldon. Now, James, the way things have gone today, piss offs on this caution flag very well could decide the outcome of this race. So the top 3 have been running nose to tail. There's been a little passing between them. Whoever comes out of the pits first is in prime position to hold the lead till the end of the race. And it's neck and neck as they run off pit road, but Sam Hornish Jr. wins the race off pit road and takes the lead away from Dan Weldon. And remember, Weldon has to win the race. Any shot at the title. So he's taking no prisoners on the restart, and he gets an absolutely perfect restart. He just gets a run to the bottom and fires past Hornish to take the lead back. So the pit stops actually weren't as important as I was making them out to be. So,
well, now that the green's back out, Scott Dixon has to run and get back by Hornish for second. Now that's going to put him right behind his teammate Weldon. And now Hornish is going to be tied for first in this championship. Now, since they're a tie, there's a tiebreaker rule, and it goes to the driver with the most wins on the season. And Sam Hornish holds that for this season. So Hornish would win the tiebreaker if it comes down to it. So he's got to lose more positions for Weldon to win this championship. But unfortunately for Helio Castroneves, he seems like he's going to be out of the running for this championship. The IRL allowed all the cars back onto the track to pit together. So he came back really far back. He restarted back behind lap down cars. Mark, explain this to me, because normally in the IRL, they let all the lead lap cars come back together and put the lap cars behind them.
So I don't know if it was a quickie yellow situation or if the situation in the IRL at the time was that all the cars pit on the same lap. So he came down behind like 10 lap cars and had to restart around lap cars. Because I know they don't always wave the lap cars around in IndyCar. So sometimes there'll be like first and second and then 3 lap cars and the third place guy, which I think is just so dumb. But
yes, and I think this was just before the wave around was actually a consistent thing in IndyCar. I think 2007 was that year where there was like wave arounds are always allowed, where I think this year, like to your point, it was dictated by race officials who was waved around.
Yeah, so that rule is going to like take Castroneves out of this fight because he's way too far behind all these lap cars. But Weldon leads, and Scott Dixon is looking to get to the outside to pass. If Dixon gets by Weldon, he definitely loses the championship to Hornish. So do you think that there should be team orders here? Because Weldon has to win, and Dixon's like, he has even less of a chance. Like he needs Sam Hornish to crash or something to have any chance.
Well, I mean, that's a real teammate. Real teammate's going to take out Sam Hornish Jr. Just saying. I mean, that's the only way to actually make this work, because to your point, Mark, if Weldon doesn't have the faster car than Dixon, Dixon can try all he can to try to block for Weldon. But the thing is, if Sam catches them both and Dan doesn't have a faster car than Sam, what are you doing? You're basically blocking at that point, and you're also blocking one guy behind you who's just as fast, if not faster than you, and you're trying to stay behind a driver who is slower than you. It's a double-edged sword, but you know what? Target Chip Ganassi Racing has done a lot of great things for Scott Dixon. I'm pretty sure he could follow some rules for Chip Ganassi if he comes over the radio.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm Ganassi. I want my cars running side by side around the track when one of them is really fighting for the title and needs to win. And Dixon has an outside chance, like we said, but he needs something crazy to happen. So all this battling, though, is allowing Sam Hornish to keep pace, and he actually gets by Dixon for second.
But you know what, Mark? In the meanwhile, somehow Helio Castroneves has made his way up to the back of the top three. What? He was out, down and out. Now we have two Ganassi cars, two Penske cars battling up at the front. Talk about team orders. Which team is going to help which team at this point? This is going to be a thrilling battle with just over 20 laps left. We have a gaggle of lap cars that are going to be caught by this lead pack, Mark. This could be the deciding factor. Who is going to get in front of each other during this battle?
Yeah, and it's almost a situation where it's like they should probably just get out of the way because these four dudes are fighting for championship, but they're fighting for their own positions in this race, and it's the last race of the season. You're fighting for jobs next year.
And how do you get out of the way with when you're running around 217 miles an hour? Getting out of the way isn't so easy to do when you're running at such a quick speed. So they're just really, to your point, they're having to hold their line, race their race, and allow the leaders to race on by. So if things aren't hot enough, they're about to heat up even more, because inside of the final 10 laps, Weldon and Dixon are going to make contact into turn one. You're teammates. Why are you touching each other? You're not supposed to hit your teammate. And I'm serious. They almost wrecked each other, but they both save it. They run the line 1 and 2, but now Hornish is coming in third and he's closing. With that momentum broken, he could win this race, Mark.
But James, they save it. Hornish doesn't get the run that he needs. They run to the line 1-2, Weldon and Dixon. Hornish comes in third, but he doesn't win the battle, James, but he wins the war. He wins the championship for the 2006 IRL season in a remarkable tie-breaking scenario. He and Dan Weldon both tied at 475 points. But as we said, Hornish's 4 wins to Weldon's now 2 wins. He gets a tiebreaker. So
USA, USA, USA. That's right. American driver Sam Hornish Jr. winning the IRL champion for the captain, Roger Penske. And Mark, if I'm not mistaken, this has been Roger's first IRL championship.
that is true. And Sam Hornish won the Indy 500 and the IRL championship in the same year.
Which means he's the king of the world. And if he's not going to Disney World with all expenses paid, I don't know what else he needs to do.
Well,
to
I think he can afford
paid.
to pay his own expenses if he wants to go to Disney
Nah,
World.
dude, like he won the Indy 500 and the championship. That's like bigger than winning the Super Bowl. Most
importantly, that's Sam Hornish's 3rd championship.
That's right.
IRL. So
2 with Panther Racing and his first, like you said, with Team Penske. And you know what? It just continues to add to the legacy of Sam Hornish Jr. in his IRL career. Throughout the mid-2000s, he was the king of close finishes, obviously really successful with the Pennzoil Panther team, got the shot with Penske and Marlboro, made the most of it. But Mark, you know, it's something interesting. We've talked about it before. People forget about Sam Hornish Jr.
Yeah, and that takes us to our What Did We Learn segment. And we really learned that Sam Hornish Jr. doesn't really exist anymore in IndyCar. It's weird. Nobody ever talks about him. You see the highlight of his Indy 500 win every now and then, but he doesn't get talked about among the greats of IndyCar really very often. And I guess maybe because he's kind of become a recluse. He doesn't like go to races. He's not involved in the sport anymore. You know, he kind of did the semi-retirement Xfinity Series thing and won a bunch of races, but then we haven't seen him since 2017. So he's just kind of been, you know, quiet, and it's weird because he's a 3-time champion. He won the most closely contested Indy 500 of all time. He won titles with 2 different teams. He won 19 IRL races at 47 podiums, but did going to NASCAR in 2008 just really tarnish him in the IndyCar paddock?
Well, that's the thing. And it's not just in the IndyCar paddock, it's in the general eyes of the public. Most people only know of Sam Hornish Jr. as the driver of the Mobile 177 car that was slinged out sideways in the All-Star race one year. That's all we know of Sam Hornish Jr. Yes, we also know that he won some Xfinity races, and he contended and finished second for an Xfinity Series title against Austin Dillon, and has won in the Xfinity Series even up to his final years in NASCAR. But we all forget that Sudden Sam was the king in IRL for the mid 2000s, winning 3 championships, winning some of the closest contested races in IndyCar history. And yet we don't talk about him at all in IndyCar. And something I think, Mark, that could be a point of that is, we talk about also history writing itself and people writing their own narratives. Does IndyCar not want to talk about its oval history that much? Are they not too proud of the fact that the IRL for several years never ran a road course, but only on ovals?
Well, IndyCar has posted on their own YouTube channel old IRL races. So they clearly, they clearly accept it as part of their history, but we don't hear it talked about a lot. We usually see highlights of kart, we see highlights of champ car, and I don't know if it's just because now like we have so few ovals on the IndyCar schedule that the IRL seems kind of out of place. And IndyCar now is really like a world-class international motorsport, and the IRL was really more seen as, well, it started as kind of like USAC guys are going to come up and run an IRL and it's going to be low budget. And then by the mid 2000s, it was like, Penske and Andretti and huge teams competing in the IRL, and kind of killed what Tony George's initial vision of it was. And then obviously the merger happens in 2008. So there's only one more season of the IRL after this. So yeah, it's weird to see Sam Hornish kind of fall out of favor in terms of like the annals of IndyCar, because he is one of the best drivers in their history. And to just, like I said, he kind of just, or like you said, sorry, he just gets tagged with this whole, while he was an unsuccessful NASCAR Cup Series driver. And that's kind of how people look at him, right? Because he really struggled those first couple of years and then found his home in the Xfinity Series and became a very formidable driver. And like you said, like I was at that race he won in Mid-Ohio in 2017, won the pole, he led the most laps, and he won the race. He absolutely dominated, which is funny because when the IRL first started going to road courses, he was not good on them. And for him to then go to NASCAR and that be his strong suit was really, really interesting.
It is. And it's like, you look at another name that we've mentioned in this race, Dario Franchitti. Dario went to NASCAR at the same time, almost in kind of a similar circumstance to Sam, because I feel like a lot of IndyCar fans felt portrayed by Sam's decision to go to NASCAR, which it's understandable at that time. Like NASCAR was an evil to the IndyCar fans. And the same thing with Dario. When Dario left IndyCar in 2007, he was the champion. He was the top guy. And he left on very odd terms because we really didn't know if Dario was going to come back to IndyCar or where he was going to go. It was all speculation and rumors. But when he announced that he was going to NASCAR, probably a lot of fans felt betrayed by it. And he didn't spend more than a year in NASCAR before coming back to IndyCar. And I feel like that helped rejuvenate his career, because then he won another championship. He had such a great success with Chip Ganassi Racing. And we remember him now from it. I mean, he's kind of faded a little bit too, but he's more remembered than Sam. And it's just odd because Sam is the epitome of what the American racing driver in IndyCar is. A guy who comes from nowhere, wherever in America, and rises to the top, wins the biggest races, wins the championship, becomes a success and household name. That's the American dream of IndyCar. That's what Tony George was trying to achieve. And Sam is that poster child. But as we've said, he just does not get remembered or recognized today the way we believe he should. I mean, even if they go to Mid-Ohio and just had Sam Hornish be the honorary starter, that would be big. But maybe Sam wants to like step away from racing, kind of how we said with AJ Foyt the fourth. There's more to life than racing. Maybe Sam has been like, you know what, I've had enough with racing. There is more to my life. I've got kids, I've got a family. Let me enjoy it. I've lived my dream. Let me just take a step away. And I mean, that could also hurt him too. So
Yeah, no, agreed. I don't know. It's just a weird scenario. And he was the last American champion until Ryan Hunter-Reay won in 2012, and then Joseph Newgarden in 2017. And so, yeah, since 2006, there's only been 3 Americans win the IndyCar Championship. So, granted, I think Dixon and Franchitti are like half of those, but
they're adopted Americans.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Give them green cards. Give them all green cards.
I would hope they have green cards by now. Yeah.
If not, they've definitely got the nice visas. You know what I mean?
You gotta get that O visa, the aliens with extraordinary abilities one. So if
I'm sorry, I forgot. Dario Franchitti is married to Ashley Judd, so he's got citizenship.
Not anymore. He was. They got divorced.
I'm pretty sure he's good. Yeah. I think the relationship was long enough for him to get his paperwork in and processed in time. Yes.
But yeah, James. Let's just quickly, that was really all we really learned was the Sam Hornish thing. And we learned that IRL, mid 2000s IRL is baller. It's baller. Way better
this
than
race
people
was
give
a
it
sellout.
credit. It's way better than people give it credit for. They're like, ooh, the IRL, it was lame. And I'm like, nah, go back and watch some of those races from like 2001, 2002. Every single finish is an absolute, like, just unreal close finish. So,
I mean, at that point, I feel like the parity with the cars, engine providers, everything was perfect. And then, to where we got to this point where this race exists, definitely the bigger teams have the stranglehold, and it's kind of a shame to see it, but that's just the evolution of sports, man. Like Ricky Rudd called it out in NASCAR a long time ago in the mid 90s. He's like, single car owners are not going to exist anymore when you have big teams coming up, and it's in every form of racing. So
is this one of the years where every car was Honda?
Yeah, I think this was after 2003, I think Chevrolet stepped out, and from 2004 to like 2007 or something like that, it was like all Honda. But yeah, it helped too, because it brought a lot of parity with the Honda engines. But then again, you never know, someone got a better engine. It's like, yeah, give Dixon the best engine. We'll give Franchitti whatever. No, man, you can't do that. Yeah, we can. We're Honda.
So James, we should quickly rate this race. To me, the race itself, in terms of competitiveness, it is a good race. Now it is a 4-horse race, mostly a 3-horse race for most of it. To me, like, this race is looked back on as more because of the championship scenario and how crazy it was. And it's interesting because, like, the race itself, was there a lot of passing? Was there a lot of, back and forth? The pit stops weren't very involved. They didn't really do much for the race, but it's crazy watching 3 of the best IndyCar drivers in the world run nose to tail like that at the absolute brink. Like, they show Scott Dixon's onboard. He could not find a way around Sam Hornish for like 50 laps. And to me, you're watching incredible racing. And to me, it's like, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10.
I'd say the racing's really good, but like the broadcast kind of like kills it a bit. I'd give it like an 8. I mean, it's
to watch the ABC broadcast, it'd be a lot better. But
if that existed, if IndyCar wants to actually post like the good version of this race up, that'd be nice.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. We're at the whim of IndyCar there. The biggest thing that really just I don't know, compared to a lot of the other ones that we've talked about, I feel like the setup for the race, there's a lot more pieces and a lot more happening in the other versions of the Chicagoland IRL races compared to the 2006 one. But you have the best drivers competing at their best. I feel like we don't give enough credit to Helio Castroneves for how hard he had to fight by himself to not only stay on the lead lap, but just try to stay in contention all race long, and just to come up short like the way he did. It showed that one issue so early on in the race could just hamper everything. So it was fun to watch Spider-Man. I wish he could have like somehow won this championship. That would have been crazy, but oh well. Unfortunately,
still not a champion. He's never won a championship in IndyCar.
He has, because he's a champion when it comes to Dancing with the Stars.
He's also won that IMSA championship. So
yeah, he has. So you got to take that back, Mark.
But he's never won a championship in IndyCar. But you know what? He's getting another chance next year because he's going full-time IndyCar racing at age 46 next year.
Yeah, because he's a 4-time Indy 500 champion. You know what? It's like, would you rather win the IndyCar title or win an Indy 500?
If you ask anyone, they'll say Indy 500. Because even if you ask Chip Ganassi Racing at the beginning of the year, what's your team's goal? And he said, number 1 is win the Indy 500. Number 2 is win the championship.
Yep.
So
especially when you have that many bullets.
and that's the thing. And it's like, it's crazy that's more important. And that's why I believe the Indy 500 should be an exhibition event. I don't think it should pay points at all. I think it should be its own thing where the top fastest 33 get in. Doesn't matter if you don't make it because there's no points involved, because you're not thinking about points anyway during the Indy 500. You're really not. Nobody cares. They're like, hey, if we hold position here, we'll get our double points and it'll be a good point state for us in our championship. It's like, no one's doing that.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, saying that the 24 hours of Le Mans or even the 24 hours of Daytona should like also be like exhibition events.
The 24 hours in Le Mans was way better when it was an exhibition race. So you want to have that discussion? We can have that discussion. But when it was not part of a world championship, it was a way better race.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends. It's like you could have it as its own race, but then again, what made that so bad back then was like, remember when USAC would just be the sanctioning body?
Yeah. But I think they can find a way to do it. Like, look at the Nürburgring 24-hour. It's amazing because it doesn't count for anything. It's its own race. It's not part of a championship. You just win the race. You go all out to try and win that race.
Well, we'll let you talk to Roger about that.
I will. I'll get on the horn to RP and be like, buddy, RP. I can call you RP, right? All right, let's get going on this. I'm sure the phone will be hung up. But I had my chance that time at Marion's. I could have talked to him, but, I was too scared. But yeah, decent race, man. 9 out of 10 for me, 8 out of 10 for you. It's a good rating, man. 17 out of 20. Come on. How many races we get that are that good? We've been looking at a lot of like not so great ones lately. So
yeah. I mean, I think they've been good. I think, to your point, people hold values on certain races. Like to you see the racing in this is like the strong suit, the selling point. The one the next year, all those I Am Indy ads. Oh my God. I Am Indy.
Yeah, they ruined the race.
Oh, Gene Simmons made that series. Come on. Gene Simmons, when he put it on his reality TV show, what he was doing. What was that? Family Jewels. Oh God, what an era of IndyCar. But Mark, this was a good podcast. Good race. You picked out a solid one. I gotta hand you on that one. And your notes, they reflect how long you have been harboring the emotions and feelings of this race. So you got that across in this episode. It was really
somebody has to. Come on. All right.
It's normally us.
Yes, it's normally us. So yeah, fun race to talk about. We have to take some time to thank our partners at Blue Emu for sponsoring the podcast and sending us wonderful product and making a product that is fantastic for helping to, help you recover from minor aches and whatnot and little things that are bugging you. It's a fantastic product. I got some of the microfoam, James, and I think that's my favorite product now. It is fantastic. Works incredible. Has no odor, does not stink, works fast. You won't stink. Incredible product.
And you can find it at major retailers, or you can go on Amazon.com and find it, because who doesn't like helping out Big Brother? Anyways, it's a great episode. We'll be back at it again next week for another episode. Who knows what we'll be covering? It'll probably be an old race that will give you maybe some kind of PTSD flashback, or you'll be like, I've never even heard about that race before.
Or it might be an interview. Could be an interview. We're working on one of those. So it could be an interview. Who knows? It could be something. It's going to be fantastic regardless. It'll be content for you.
That's right. Until next time, we'll see you in the next episode.